Welcome to Crime, Corrections, and Culture, folks. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, joined by Persephone, our co host. She's always here to ask the questions. Well, she wasn't here yesterday, but you get my drift. Super chats, super stickers, we absolutely love them. And other than that, I'm giving it to Persephone to dive right in.
So today we are talking about anger. Um, so the chapter is called Simmering Anger Flaring into Rage. And in this chapter they talk about how like a criminal's anger is different from regular people's anger, right?
Okay.
Um, so he says, when a tiny pin punctures a balloon, the entire balloon bursts. The same thing occurs at the smallest setback with a criminal whose entire self image is on the line. What most people would consider just a part of life, the criminal reacts to as if something catastrophic has transpired. So, one of the examples that he gives is, well, in this chapter, he talks about three people, four people, three or four. And the one was a woman who was shopping, and she had her trolley, and she was walking down the aisles, and she was rushing around, and she thought that she heard two people say that bitch is gonna like knock into us or something along those lines. And in response to this, she grabbed the woman that had said this and just viciously beat her. Um, So, I mean, you've said in the past that anger is one of the things that you still struggle with the most.
It might be, to be honest with you, the only. Like, I'm not going to lie to anybody. I'm not going to manipulate. I'm not going to steal from anybody. I'm not going to commit any robberies. I'm not concerned with any of that stuff. But I do still struggle with anger. There's no doubt about that.
So, he also says he he talks about the sort of the basis of the anger, and that criminals have sort of a simmering baseline. They're always angry, you know. There's
Yep.
just a constant baseline. Were you I mean, were you like that? Were you just
Yeah.
always
Sure.
simmering?
I was an angry person, no doubt about that. Uh, Mad at myself, mad at life, mad at other people, whatever. Now I'm not always mad, but I do have, on a daily basis, I have a plan in my head. And I don't do well when the plan gets interrupted or the plan does, if I get sidetracked, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I get agitated. And sometimes I get more angry than at other times. Now, that anger is not going to result in violence any longer, but it's still uncomfortable and it still can lead me to, I end up mistreating people and snapping at people and things of that nature. So it's still a problem. Akira, yeah, I was always angry. I mean, see, here's where, so Akira says you get frustrated. That's different. It's not. And that's the problem is what you would consider, a normal frustration. To me, I end up with tension headaches, angry, irrationally so at times. What I mean by irrationally so is that the level of anger doesn't match the level of frustration. Again, I'm not going to be committing assaults over this, but it's still a problem in that it interferes with my own well being and my relationships with other people. When I was a teenager, I was mad all the time. Now that when I say that, like you talk about this underlying, this baseline, I could go out, I could have fun, I'd laugh, I'd joke, but there was always a level of anger and I guess maybe even depression, I would say, although the doctors don't really talk about that. But so that was always there.
So the other thing, Akira says you get frustrated, not angry, and this is something that's covered later in this chapter, is that anger for a criminal and anger for a regular person is different, and it's why anger management courses, specifically for criminals, do not work, are doomed to fail, because telling a criminal that their anger is justified or that their anger is okay is counterproductive, because
Yeah. I
because with an
Can I just say real quickly, Persephone? I kind of disagree with them a little bit on this, not much. I don't think, because they talk about you have to eliminate anger completely, and I just don't think that's realistic.
I don't think that's possible.
I think that it's possible to significantly decrease it. And I think that has to do with the way that we view ourselves, the world, other people, the future. And I think we can alter our thoughts and significantly diminish the anger. But I don't think that anybody that I've ever met certainly never gets angry.
I also don't think that it would be healthy to eliminate anger
It
a
depends
hundred
what you mean. Are
percent.
you suppressing it, or are you actually
Yeah.
learning how to
To
view
never
the
get
world more
angry.
accurately? Well, if you're not getting angry at all because things just aren't getting you upset, that's one thing. If you're suppressing it, that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, that's also true. So I asked a question yesterday while you were discussing the criminal thinking errors, which by the way have been posted to the YouTube channel. So if you go to the post tab, you can see the PDF that has all of the thinking errors in it. So the question that I asked was, do you think that all of the work that you've had to do to address all of these thinking errors and the sense of guilt and all of this, do you think that that's part of what has helped you to become so principled and to be so firm in your principles?
Yeah, virtually everything that I've ever, not everything, most of the people that I've read that have really addressed character change talk about consistency, about never behaving badly, never lying. You don't allow that, whether it be the doctors, Ayn Rand, Nathaniel Branden, even James Allen, and As a Man Thinketh, is that character is an all the time thing. It's a commitment to principle over the course of your entire life. It doesn't just go away. Does it mean that I always live up to it? No, I fail. But I don't fail and then say, that's just me. That's just life. Nobody's perfect. I fail and then I make an attempt to fix what I failed at.
Yeah, because I mean, you a person who is not a criminal and who has never had to undergo like a complete personality overhaul, that is essentially what it is, like an overhaul of the way that you think,
Yeah.
which is really tough because a lot
Yeah.
of these things are not subconscious but like not explicit. So a person who's never had to do that will probably find it a lot easier to just let
Well,
things happen on autopilot.
okay. So what the doctors say is that the criminal has to change his entire personality, entire character structure. This is a constellation of habits that have been built up over the course of a lifetime. So you're talking about hundreds of habits ultimately. So the analogy they give for anybody who wants to know how hard it is to change your entire personality structure and all of your bad habits, try to change one and see how difficult it is. Try to change if you're a smoker, if you're an overeater, if you watch too much TV, if you're swearing more than you'd like to, whatever it is. Pick one bad habit and try to change it and see how difficult it is, and then multiply that by 100, and you might get some idea of what we're talking about.
No,
So,
I don't want to.
when we're talking about anger, so you let's say you're in line in the chow hall in prison, and somebody cuts ahead of you, or the med line, whatever. This used to drive me batty when they would do it. There's a tendency, so you might think, well, this guy's doing that to me on purpose, or, he's trying to screw me. But it really has nothing to do with you. It's just the person doesn't care about anybody around them, just wants what he's going to get. Or if somebody bumps into you in a line on the street or in the supermarket or whatever, a criminal is liable to personalize it immediately, think it was intentional, and then it's intentional. This person's trying me. This person's disrespecting me. It's the way that the criminals are analyzing and interpreting situations that leads to the anger, and the anger is, off the charts. It also doesn't help to constantly be thinking of yourself as a victim, to think that you're entitled to whatever you want in this world, and to always think people are challenging your rights. You're gonna be angry.
So he talks about like in prison that it's basically a powder keg, because you have all of these people who take every single perceived slight as like a personal pointed attack, combined with people who don't think about other people at all. So, you know, everybody thinks that everybody else is doing things personally to them, but that person is only thinking about themselves. And you put a bunch of these people together, and it's why like there's so many fights and so much crap happens in prison.
Well, I've
Because
often said you put, like, this is one of the reasons I'm very much opposed to double cells. Two people in a cell together. You're essentially taking a bunch of sociopaths two at a time and telling them, here, live together and make it work. No, it's likely not to work. And what if one of them decides to change? Now you've got a guy that's trying to become a non-sociopath in with somebody who has no desire at all to stop with this type of behavior, and it creates a lot of problems.
yeah, I mean, you said it was hard enough just living in the same block with a bunch of people who are constantly like slamming dominoes and stuff.
Yeah,
But at least
absolutely.
you, for a lot of the time, had a cellmate who was also interested in being better. But I mean, if you had, you know, in the beginning, you'd had a cellmate who was just as difficult as all of those other people, it probably would have been much more not
Oh, I've
difficult.
had guys like I had one guy who liked to sit in the corner, with his music blasting, tapping on the windowsill. And I'm like, dude, like you gotta stop, man, please. Like,
I don't think I don't think I would survive prison. I really
well, now
don't.
here's the thing. Now here's what you have to understand, because this is a dynamic now. So if I'm trying to change myself, which I was, and you put me in the cell with somebody that's doing that and will not stop, like, all my techniques of communication are working, but I still have the violence inside me. I still have the anger inside me. I know how to put a stop to that shit real quick. You know what I mean? So then you
Yeah.
have to fight against that. Like, I don't want to throw everything that I've built away on this asshole. But, when it's every day, all day, it gets taxing for sure.
Yeah, so Akira says, but what if both decided to change? You needed Brent to help you. Accountability partners are very important out of prison. I imagine they're even more inside of prison.
Sure. And out of the 1,800 or so inmates that were at McDougal, there was one that I could have been a cellmate with. Probably would have been more than that. I mean, that would have helped. You can't build prison policy based on that. And Brent was in the block with me anyways, and that really helped a lot. And if I was in a cell alone, it would have been great. You know what I mean? Like, being in a cell alone and then coming out and interacting with Brent and dealing with Brent would have been fine.
So if you look at the way that they talk about anger in this chapter, it ties in to so many of the other thinking errors, because you've said it ties into the entitlement, it ties into the sense of uniqueness and the victim narrative, and like your perception of yourself as a good person. Because if you believe that you're a good person and you also perceive every single thing that anybody does as a personal attack, then it makes it even worse because you're like, I'm such a good person, and this dude is like skiff eyeing me at the tilt.
Skiff eyeing?
Uh, how do you translate that? Yeah. So we say, oh, here we go. They looked at you sideways.
Okay. Yeah.
So in Afrikaans, sideways is skew, is skiff, but then we talk lazy, so we say skiff. So if you
Skiff.
say they skiff-eyed you, it means they were looking at you skew.
So one day
Basic.
I was doing laps in the block, and this guy, he had been in the block maybe a month. He calls me over. He said, "Come here for a second." I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he says, Do I know you from somewhere?" I said, "Not that I know of, because but it's possible. I've been in prison a long time." He said, "Well, if you don't know me, why do you keep looking at me?" I didn't look at him once. I said, "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Don't try to play me for stupid." I said, I don't remember what I said. Basically, probably something to the effect of, whatever you think happened, I apologize. I'm not trying to do that, but yeah, that happens where people think you're looking at them. Not even, dude, wasn't even on my mind.
Yeah, but so again, it ties in to so many of the thinking areas because you're taking everything personally. You think that you're a good person who other people are like unfairly attacking. You don't want to have any obligations. So when someone like tries to make you do something, even if it's your job, you know, and then this weird ability that you have to just shut off your conscience and the desire to control everything around you, it's not any wonder that this
That,
does
that,
create a person who
that
is,
criminals end up in prison.
yeah,
Yeah.
that creates a person who is constantly angry because, so he gives an example and he says, like, imagine if your expectations were that everything in your day was going to go perfectly and that everybody around you was going to accommodate every one of your desires and nothing was ever going to go wrong, and those expectations aren't met, you
Of
would
course they're
also
not.
be
Yeah.
yeah, you would also be angry.
Yeah.
So I mean, what you say you still struggle with anger, but
Yeah.
it's obviously not the same as it used to
No,
be.
no. It's usually my anger stems from if I'm trying to do something, and like if I'm doing this and somebody in the house is making noise or the dogs are barking and I'm trying to focus, I'm trying to think, that's the type of thing that makes me angry. Um, when I want to watch a show at night and I'm waiting for Diana, but she forgot something, that sometimes will really aggravate me a lot.
Or when
That's
she
the
chews
type of
jelly
thing.
beans in your ear while you're trying
Yeah,
to read.
yeah.
So Akira says criminals sometimes don't end up in prison. And then he makes a joke about the White House. The thing that I find interesting
I don't think
is
that's a joke, but okay.
oh, no, it's not because he is a criminal. But anyway, the thing that I find interesting is when you look at how they describe criminals, not every person who is a criminal is going to end up in prison, and there are people in prison who are not criminals. Does that make sense?
Uh, it does. I've never met one.
Yeah,
Here's
sure.
something. Here's something interesting. Even the guys I've known in prison that were innocent
Still
were,
criminals.
yeah. Now I don't know if they just got to prison and just said hell with it, or if they were like that beforehand. I don't know.
Interesting. So because you obviously had to go through this huge personality overhaul, thinking overhaul, when you do get angry, and this is something that you're very aware of because I've asked some variation of this question a bunch of times, and the anger is the thing that you always bring up. So you're obviously
Yeah.
very aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
What is it what is it like to know where that anger comes from and like what its cause is? Does that make sense? Does the question I'm
Um.
asking make sense?
Yeah. Here's the problem. right? And not the problem, but a problem.
Uh,
It's like somebody that has OCD, right? You might know that you have OCD, but this time you'd better check that door, right? This time. And it's the same thing. Like I might know that I do get angry unjustifiably, but each time I get angry, it seems like this time it's justified. Now, I don't say that to myself, but that's the sense. A lot of times I'll catch it and I'll say, you know what, I'm sorry, I apologize. But there's times when the hardest time is this, when somebody legitimately does something inconsiderate, whatever. It's something that is warrants saying, "Hey, can you not do that?" Or warrants being a little annoyed, but then the appropriate level. Because yes, this is wrong. Like, I don't think Diana should chew jelly beans in my ear while I'm reading. Do I think it's reasonable to become so pissed off about it? No, right? So, but I do think it's something that warrants being upset a little bit, and that's where it sometimes is difficult. But the main thing that's helped me, or I don't know about the main thing, but it's up there, is understanding that I don't have to act, right? Just because I'm mad doesn't mean I have to hit somebody. Just because I'm angry doesn't mean I have to lash out. And it's the same thing with any other emotion. Just because I'm sad doesn't mean I have to skip work. Or just because I'm depressed, it doesn't mean I don't have to keep up with my obligations. Right? I don't have to cater to every emotion that I have.
so, I mean, Ian Gilmore says emotions can also be faster than the conscious mind. That's very true.
It is, but I don't know why I did the hand motion, but I did.
It was very nice. I enjoyed
But
it.
we can prime ourselves and train ourselves in the way that we think so that we don't get those emotional responses. In the moment, it's difficult. I mean, we can talk ourselves down, but over the long haul, yeah. I mean, I don't get as angry or angry as frequent as I once did, nor is my response to my anger the same as it once was.
What did you. Weird question to ask. What did you do to. And obviously, it's still something that you're working on, but what kinds of things did you do to work on your anger response? Because I know that I have a terrible, terrible, terrible temper, right? I have BPD, so I have like rage triggers. And for me to control my violent anger was extremely difficult. And my father was the same, He in Samenow talks about like road rage, when someone cuts you off, the guy chases them down and physically intimidates them. That was my dad, right? So I know for myself, working on my anger and getting my anger to a point where I wasn't like destroying things was extremely difficult. So what worked for you? What did you do to control your anger?
Mostly is learning to see the world differently, right? Having the long range purpose, like we talked about earlier, understanding how acting out angrily can harm me, in addition to harming other people, right? Learning how to put myself in other people's position. Understanding that oftentimes things aren't as serious as they seem to me in the moment, or understanding that a lot of times it's not intentional, that somebody else isn't deliberately trying to piss me off or trying to harm me in some way. Understanding that I often do the very thing that I'm getting upset at somebody else for doing, right? So there's an abundance of things, but it all boils down to thinking rationally. Right? If you want me to summarize quickly, it's thinking rationally. And Ian also asked, is it partially because you're older? Probably. I mean, there's the maturation hypothesis that criminals age out of it. I think criminals end up committing less crimes as they get older. I don't necessarily think the criminal thinking goes away, but I haven't lashed out violently at somebody in over 20 years. So,
So
I've gotten pissed, but not that pissed. So age probably helps, but without the change in thinking, none of that matters.
he says, Samenow says, that underlying the anger is a sense of worthlessness, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that developing an actual self-esteem is one of the things that has helped? Because
Yeah.
you said that you had that baseline simmering anger and depression, right? So do you think that like developing
Yes, I do.
self-esteem
Yeah, because
helps?
I don't care as much about other people, what they're thinking about me, or what if you say something to me in front of others, how are they gonna interpret it? Are they going to think I'm a pussy now because I've allowed this person to say something? That type of stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, once you have self esteem and you are confident in yourself and confident you're doing the right thing and you're not so insecure. When you're insecure, everything is a slight or a challenge to your very person. No, and that doesn't happen to me now. That more than anything, I think explains why the anger doesn't turn into violence any longer because it's not stemming from that place where I feel like my identity is challenged. Now the anger stems from annoyance at things not going the way that I want, not at being challenged at the core of who I am.
Yeah. And I mean the examples that he gives in the book of like the causes for criminals to get violent are so insane. The woman who someone called her a bitch, so she attacked them. A 16-year-old, someone mocked him for wearing, or said he mocked him for being the only kid in school, in the gym class, to be wearing a green shirt. So he chased him down and beat him with a stick. I mean, did you also fly off the handle for like dumb reasons?
Yeah, yeah, often.
And were you proud of your? I mean, you've said something similar. You were proud of being a badass and being feared.
Um, I was proud of controlled violence more, if I had to say, and it's a long time. So I mean, I may just be misremembering, but far more proud of controlled violence than of losing my temper and flying off the handle. That's not fun. That's not comfortable. You
No,
know
but
what I
I
mean?
mean, proud of the violence, proud of being the
But
kind
I
of
could be
person.
violent without being angry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and that I was proud of. Yeah, for sure. But proud to lose my cool, lose my temper. I don't think so.
no.
Maybe in retrospect, or maybe in thinking that other people feared me because of it. Yeah, but I never liked feeling angry. It's an uncomfortable feeling.
What has been so interesting to me about reading this is we talked about the criminal thinking areas, but to see how intertwined they are and how it's impossible to untangle one from the other, like they all work together,
Yeah,
has been like one of the most fascinating things, especially the anger, because to see where that comes from, the entitlement, the ego, well, not ego, but
I know what
the,
you mean. Fragile
yeah,
ego.
fragile ego, sense of, uniqueness, like everything is personal. I'm the center of the universe. Um, that's been really interesting to me. We have 45 seconds. I don't really have any more questions. This was a great chapter to read. I think everybody should go and read this book, but the one that Michael is in, not the one that I have.
The newest one, yes, the newest
Yeah,
edition
the newest one.
of Inside the Criminal Mind. Thanks everybody for your comments and questions. Really, really appreciate it. Please remember, in 20 minutes from now, we're having a great debate on this channel between two very bright young men, both younger than 25. it's going to be an excellent debate about objectivism. I highly recommend you tune in. Other than that, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Persephone. And we will see you on the Capitalist Corner, hopefully, tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time.
Save this question for.
Save it for tomorrow.
There's no thingy tomorrow.
Well,
Monday.
it's Monday.